And we're going to ask everyone, all of the panelists and our Madam Facilitator, if you'd want to go ahead and now share this on your page. Perhaps your friends and family will want to join in at this time. Good evening, everyone. We're streaming live to you from Flagstaff, Arizona. And this evening, I'm very excited about tonight's topic. This is a project that's being brought to you in partnership with the Southside Community Association, the Murdoch Community Center here in Flagstaff, Arizona. And we call this project the Black Lived Experience. And this is an opportunity to bring together like-minded people to give you a historical perspective on a new topic every 2 weeks. This week, we are talking about Black Wall Street, Black entrepreneurship, Black business ownership, and we have a very exciting panel for you this evening, some local, some out of state, and we're just some regional, and we're very happy this evening to welcome you to this live broadcast. Our facilitator for this evening is Sister Cara House. And Sister Cara, will you introduce our panel this evening?
Yes, good evening, everyone. We are excited to go ahead and get started. The first panel that we'll be having is going to be hosted by Dr. Ricardo Guthrie on the history of Black Wall Street. Dr. Guthrie is Associate Professor of Ethnic Studies at Northern Arizona University. He examines political narratives of the Black press and writes about cinema as cultural political artifacts. He was lead artist for the historic Southside mural at the Murdoch Community Center in 2011. Good evening, Dr. Guthrie.
Thank you. Good to see you. I think what I'll do is try to share my PowerPoints, and then you'll do the introductions of the other folks who are with us later. So here we go.
Sir.
And I will share my screen. The application. All right. I'm in the show. And I'm going to click on this first slide here. I'll just need one more assist to get the PowerPoint up from the staging area back up to the front page here. I'm sharing my screen now with you all, but it's still just showing up on my desktop. So I need just another there it is. Okay, and so I'll go with the full screen for this. If I may, right from the current slide. Let me see if this will work for you all. Okay. All right. So let me start with that. Black Wall Street, Greenwood, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1921. And it's almost been 100 years since this Black Wall Street, this thriving business, was destroyed. A lot of us have been studying about Black Wall Street for the last 10 years, but I think the nation as a whole has started to come to understanding the significance of Black Wall Street based on what? A show called The Watchmen, in which they did a special episode in which Tulsa, Oklahoma was destroyed. But it existed before that time as a thriving business area. It was named Black Wall Street by Booker T. Washington because the Greenwood district had so many Black businesses and entrepreneurs that it was quite successful and very affluent. So what happened? There was a destruction of Black Wall Street because there are whites who assumed that a Black young man had raped a woman. Turned out it wasn't true. but the local newspaper, the Tulsa Tribune, put out a salacious story that a young black man had attacked an innocent white woman in an elevator. Now, the young man ran for his life, but he was captured and held in the jail. Later that evening, whites descended on the jail, demanding the life of this young black teenager, who was innocent. There were black veterans from World War I who surrounded the jail to protect him. So they were armed and they were protecting him. And of course, shots rang out and the riot was on. It wasn't really a riot. It was more like a massacre in which blacks were rounded up, forced out of their homes. Their homes were destroyed. They say 39 people officially were killed, but the number is quite higher. It's probably closer to 300 confirmed. So a salacious and largely fabricated news story about a young black man assaulting a white girl. A lynch mob shows up. Black World War I veterans protect the young black man. Fighting breaks out, and then the Greenwood area is under attack. So city officials, law enforcement, and guardsmen started to round up thousands of residents. Planes circled overhead. They dropped bombs and incendiary devices on top of the buildings and burned Black Wall Street to the ground. The people who were killed, again, ranging from 39 officially to over 300, were dumped into unmarked graves. And then those who survived, the thousands of blacks who were still in Tulsa, were told, we'll rebuild your district for you, but for now you'll have to live on your own in an area that would be held for those who've been displaced. They were considered refugees in their own city. This massacre lay hidden for decades. I have two pictures here of some of the headstones in Oaklawn Cemetery in Tulsa, Oklahoma. There are very few graves that were actually marked. And so even if there were more than 800 people injured, at least 300 who might have died, we may never know the exact total because there were mass graves and the bodies were not actually identified completely. So on the left side is the Oaklawn Cemetery where victims were buried. And then on the right side is the Tulsa today as the city skyline, as they're trying to make up for the end of race relations here. There are a lot of historians who tried to uncover the truth over several decades. Lots of books that have been published. One I'd recommend to you is called Death in a Promised Land by Scott Ellsworth, a Tulsa Oklahoman who wrote about the Tulsa race riot of 1921. Since that time, there's been a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to find out what really happened, and of course, to ask for reparations for the survivors, if there were any, and their descendants. So there's a huge segment in the African-American community that has still been looking for justice for decades, since the massacre of 1921. I'm looking at a story here that was published just recently. Dr. Robert Turner, pastor of the Vernon African-American Episcopal Church in Greenwood, is trying to lead an effort to find out what happened. Again, a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Just this past spring, the mayor of Tulsa, Mayor G.T. Bynum, finally agreed. He says, we have to make an investigation as if this was a crime investigation and to find out what really happened. There have been others who've been trying to bring this truth to the light. And if it weren't for the events of the last spring, in which George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and many other blacks who had been killed across the country, if there weren't such an uprising, this still would probably be part of a mystery to be solved. So what happens next is that they'll try to uncover the silence. There was an archaeological dig that's begun on this site here in Oakland Cemetery, and they haven't found bodies yet. But as soon as they do, they will begin to catalog what happened in the history and try to find out who are the actual victims that were there. Now, why did this come to light? Aside from what happened in 2020, as early as the 1990s, many people were comparing what happened to Black Wall Street and the residents as a type of domestic terrorism. That's right, terrorism. Not just violence and not just race unrest, but a type of terrorism against Black people, because Black Wall Street was quite significant in terms of its model for the rest of the nation. Here was a segregated town in which Blacks were forced into the Greenwood district, and they turned it to be very, very lucrative, not because they were segregated, but because they were successful businessmen and businesswomen. They had turned their shares from World War I and from being homesteaders in Oklahoma, into a very profitable business that served the Black and the white community. But it was still a matter of segregation. And that created a type of envy and jealousy between the whites and the Black neighborhoods. So a little bit about the Tulsa Greenwood area. It was a thriving Black community, a rarity in terms of how it survived under threat of lynching or segregation and the rapidly growing Ku Klux Klan. In May of 1921, the Greenwood neighborhood had a population of nearly 10,000 people. That was huge at the time. They were descendants of slaves, and they were professionals. They were World War I veterans, and they were entrepreneurs who had come to Oklahoma because it seemed to offer an escape from the harsher realities of life in the South. Black Tulsans, segregated into Greenwood, had built a thriving business district known as Black Wall Street. There were wealthy Black landowners from Arkansas who moved there. Others who came to the area named it after a street in Greenwood, Mississippi, and the name was later extended to the whole neighborhood. Residents owned grocery stores. There were hotels, theaters, transportation services that were all run by Black entrepreneurs. That's what people don't know, according to State Senator Kevin Matthews. We had the kind of prosperity in 1921 that was like a Black Wall Street. And there was a reason. And it was burned down and destroyed for a reason. So the massacre, as I mentioned, started out because there was a false rumor about a young Black man named Dick Rowland, who was accused of assaulting an elevator operator on May 30th, 1921. So he gets to escape under gunpoint by the World War I veterans, and then the whole town blows up. So even though Rowland was later exonerated and proven that he hadn't done anything, the damage is already done. The mob destroyed Greenwood and Black Wall Street, and the people who survived were treated like refugees. So here's a picture of the refugee camp on the fairgrounds in Tulsa after the race riot of June 1st. So it was 2 or 3 days of burning and looting and death. And here are the people who were assembled. Others, on the right side, you show some of the patients who were still recovering as late as November of 1921, still recovering from their injuries. Again, more than 800 people had been injured, and again, up to 300 people who were killed. And on the left side, these are all pictures from the Library of Congress. You see some of the debris that was left over after Greenwood was burned to the ground. So Black Wall Street, we like to talk about this now. I think we've been using this term, like I said, for the last 10 years to try to describe what can happen when different Black entrepreneurs and business people come together to turn segregation into congregation, who turn Jim Crow and can't succeed in the rest of the world to succeed within the Black community. I want to mention that the Black Wall Street story is a matter of a cover-up, because there are continuities between this community and other Black communities that have been destroyed in Florida and in the South. There were several towns throughout the Midwest that they called sundown towns. Sundown towns meant that you can't let the sun set on your back if you're Black. You better get out of town before the sun goes down. So there are many people who had to leave their hard-earned jobs and their houses under the threat of violence. And again, it is a form of terrorism that these Black survivors had to leave their town. There have been inquiries from time to time, not just in Greenwood, but also in Florida and elsewhere. There have been efforts to provide reparations to descendants, not just to put money in their pockets, but to actually rebuild Greenwood. to rebuild the Black district, and then to use that as a model for spurring Black development and Black entrepreneurship throughout not only Oklahoma, but the rest of the country. So there is something to reparations that don't necessarily go all the way back to 1865. They go back to the 20th century, and some of them just go back a couple of years, because the descendants of the descendants are still suffering from the impacts of the Black Wall Streets that have been destroyed. So we can go back and use the forensics. We can examine what happened to the people and look at the graves, but the truth of the massacre may not ever be known. And the continuities to other Black communities that are still survive to this day need to be brought to the front. So I'm glad we get a chance to talk about Black Wall Street, and also to reach out to the existing businessmen and businesswomen who will be talking with us today, because they are the ones who continue to share the hope and the promise of being part of a Black community that is redeeming the history of America. And so what happens now? Well, like I say, you can use this as a great crime scene and try to dig up the bodies that are there in this mass grave and find out what really happened. But I think it's more important to talk about the significance of why this Black community was under attack. These were not poor people. These were not people who were looking for a handout. These weren't even people who were working for others. They worked for themselves. And for that, they incurred the wrath of the larger white community. For that, the truth and reconciliation that has to happen really must start there, because these are the ones who tried to show America the promise of itself, and they were forced to pay the price. Black Tulsa, Black Wall Street, they are very defiant and very proud of the history that they have. And now I think they become the model for Black businesses across the country, not because they were destroyed, but because they sought the truth. What happens now is what we talk about when we go to find out the extent of Black businesses, Black self-determination using economic means. I'm going to stop sharing my my video here now so that we can talk about the next phase in this. This has been just a brief overview to set the tone for a Black Wall Street discussion. So here's my cam, and I will stop screen there, Sister Bernadine, and there we go.
Here we are. Thank you, Dr. Guthrie, for that. We're encouraging viewers, if you have any questions about this segment, please go ahead and post them now. Give the history of Black entrepreneurship here in the U.S. would be quite extensive, and I do hope that we can come back with another discussion to actually highlight some of those Black entrepreneurs. But tonight, if I had to dedicate this segment to a Black entrepreneur, it would be Brother Jeremiah Hamilton. He was from IT, and he was a Wall Street broker, and he's noted as being, at that time in 1875, the only Black millionaire in New York City. And this was about a decade before the American Civil War. And stats are showing us right now that there are about 2.6 billion Black businesses here in the U.S. And so truly, we have been in corporate and doing our thing and on our hustles and on our grind for a very long time. And so that is indeed what this segment this evening is all about. So Dr. Guthrie, thank you so much for that, and we'll see you back in a moment.
Okay, thank you.
And Sister Kara, it's now on you. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Guthrie, and thank you, Sister Bernadine. We are now going to move into the third part of tonight's presentation, which is focused on the question, why Black business matters. We are very excited to have a panel of Black business professionals and entrepreneurs to bring this dialogue into the modern and a little bit more local narrative. We're going to begin with Mr. Jabarha Nichols. Jabarha Nichols, aka KUTZ, was born in Flagstaff, Arizona, lived in Oakland, California for 10 years, and returned to Flagstaff in 1985, where he attended Flagstaff Middle School and graduated from Flagstaff High School. A month after graduating from the Universal Barber College in Phoenix in 2005, he opened KUTZ Barbershop in Flagstaff, where he has served the community both by cutting hair and offering wisdom and resources to help local youth. After 9 years behind the chair, KUTZ was inspired to educate others and preserve the art of barbering and launched the KUTZ Barber College, which has now graduated over 30 students. KUTZ also sits on the board of the United Way of Northern Arizona. Good evening.
Good evening, Kara. I appreciate you having me on.
All right. So, yeah, tell us about your business. Tell us about what you do, and just give us your history and your story.
Okay. Well, what I do is I provide education for young barbers out there that want to be barbers. They want to make the difference. You know, I'm trying to show entrepreneurship. You know, holding students and young individuals or older individual accountable for their actions. I lead by example. You know, the old phrase, you teach a man to fish, he can fish for the rest of his life. He can eat for the rest of his life, you know. Um, Currently, I'm trying to open up a cosmetologist school, KUTZ Beauty College, to provide for men and women. Um, I got two young kids that look up to me, and I try to do the best that I can to provide them with a good education and the know-how to go out there and grind it out and get it on your own. It's really hard being a Black individual, especially in a town like Flagstaff, when there's not that many Black people, to succeed. So I try my best to lead by example and try to make a good provide a good platform for my kids to grow off of.
Wonderful. I think one of the things that you said in your introduction was also about your focus on serving the community and being ingrained in the community. Can you just talk a little bit more about that before we move on to the next panelist?
Oh, absolutely. Like, you know, if you put out into the universe goodness and good things, like for instance, just like opening the door for an elderly person. Thank you. Please, you know, being courteous. That's the things I try to teach these young individuals, and how to clean the bathroom. You know, nowadays these kids can't even clean a dang restroom. You know, I had one student couldn't mop, so I had to teach him how to mop. You know, so you know, as far as like the community, I'm trying to reach as many as people as I can, because a lot of kids don't want to go to a 4-year college, and I can provide that other outlet for, you know, a 10-month program where they can get their education here and then be successful in life, you know, as a barber.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
We're going to hear from next Dr. Eric Luster. Dr. Luster is the CEO and founder of Movement Interactive Incorporated and is a highly respected innovator in the fields of technology, entrepreneurship, and leadership. Dr. Luster started his early career as a nuclear biology chemical specialist in the United States Army, where he rose through the ranks in his early 20s and was responsible for upwards of 40 personnel and over $20 million worth of tactical equipment. He has held positions as a research scientist and senior systems engineer in both the private sector and for the Department of Defense. Dr. Luster has been recognized as the Veteran Entrepreneur of the Year, the Top 50 Technology Visionaries in 2019, and is a recipient of the Bronze Star Medal as a result of his technical expertise, leadership, and performance in combat while in the U.S. Army. Dr. Lester was selected as the Arizona Republic's top 35 entrepreneurs under 35 and was named one of the top 40 under 40 business leaders by the Phoenix Business Journal. Dr. Lester has a loving wife and 3 children, ages 6, 9, and 19. Welcome, Dr. Lester.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Sister Carr. I am really excited to be here. And I learned along this journey that telling my story is extremely important. And I'm going to start off with a story that resonates well with this board and this talk. So as a technology company and building sophisticated technology innovation, I often have to pitch and raise capital in order to get through the manufacturing process. And one time I decided to pitch to a group of older Caucasian males, and I focused more on the technology and took my story out. Big mistake. By the time I got done, they had more stories about how I actually came upon this technology, more so than what the technology was about. So just like you stated, 20 years ago, I started my professional career with the Army as the nuclear biological chemical specialist. And so that has put me on a journey and a path to really grow and do something innovative and also support the community. Along that journey, I ended up going into industry where I got the notion and I had the desire to achieve the goal of making 6 figures in my job career. Of course, being excited, being motivated, I achieved that goal in no time. I hit that goal at about 26 years old. And what I found out is that it was not fulfilling. And so that's when I kept going and I wanted to be an entrepreneur and start a company that was meaningful. And at the time, my eldest son was playing football, and we were working with sensor technology. And I decided to try to adapt some technology to look at the safety around my son. And that's when I was actually recruited over to Arizona State University by one of the newest director of the National Science Foundation, where they put me in the Center for Cognitive and Ubiquitous Computing. And so that's where I really started to fine tune my approach and my technology. And I actually started to build out the technology to do something about my son's problem. And that was my problem. I was concerned about him playing sports. And so we ended up developing a sensor that would detect and report concussions in real time. And why it's so important that you get someone that's involved with the community, that understands, being a former athlete myself, being in the military, I was able to make some really good choices to develop the technology that would be suitable for other athletes. In many cases, I had business mentors that were pretty aggravated that I was interviewing people of my color, my community. They thought that this innovative technology should probably be sold to someone who could afford it. I thought totally different than that, because when you look at the NBA and 70% are players of color, I wanted to build some technology that would capture anyone that, even if they were a socially economic disadvantage. And so I wanted to definitely pull that out, this technology, and a piece to everyone. Oh, hello.
There we go. Thank you very much.
Great.
We will come back with some questions for you in a bit. Right now, we are going to move on to our next panelist, who is Ms. Kim Robinson.
Excellent.
Kim Robinson, as a small business owner for over 20 years, Kim established Gallyvant as a fair trade importer in response to a lack of diverse, multicultural gifts in the retail market, and because of her excitement for the fair trade business model. In this capacity, she also represented other artists at trade shows and craft fairs, then guided many entrepreneurial artisans in establishing an online presence, marketing, and social media. After serving as an officer in the United States Air Force, Kim continued in the logistics field as a project manager and over-the-road truck driver, and afterwards as a contracting officer for the National Park Service. Currently, Gallyvant has customers in 6 countries and carries fair trade handicrafts from over 30. Good evening.
Good evening, Ms. Carr. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes.
I'm very excited to be here. And Black-owned businesses, I bring a lot of background that seems to be diverse and chaotic, probably. Some people think that you're just all over the place, but I find that my experiences from logistics to my book learning, I think people have book learning and they have technical learning. My book learning is cultural anthropology. My technical background is project management and logistics. But all that comes together in my small business ownership and also my passion for fair trade. In this community in Flagstaff, I saw that there used to be a fair trade shop before I got here, and I believe the owners of that moved away. And I saw that here in Flagstaff, there was a lack of multicultural and world goods that are fair trade. And fair trade is a concept in which the buyers, like as a buyer, I actually invest in that community's welfare. I invest in their education, and I dedicate myself to educating people about fair trade. And I saw that there was a lack of that in Northern Arizona, which motivated me to revamp and restart my business here. I've owned it for 20 years, but I found that coming into this area, there was a prime opportunity, especially for people that were looking for those kinds of items here in Northern Arizona. So it's been a wonderful journey, and I believe that Black-owned businesses, we bring a very important perspective into American business history. American business history does have a lack of what the diverse businesses that have existed and that still exist. And I believe that everyone is losing out on that business history because there's so many different voices that contribute to this tapestry.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
I was just writing down some questions that I'm going to have for you about that that last part specifically, but we look forward to getting into the question and answer portion. And just as a reminder to everybody who's watching right now, if you have live questions that you would like to be asked of the panelists, please make sure you're putting those into the comments so we can get to those as we are soon entering into the live question and answer portion. Our last panelist this evening is Mr. Chris Johnson. Chris Johnson first appeared on Shark Tank, where he secured a deal with Mark Cuban for his invention, the Rapid Ramen Cooker. He has since created over 24 products, which are available in over 50,000 retail stores, including Walmart, Target, CVS, and Amazon. Through his passion to help entrepreneurs reach success, he has created Zero to a Billion, a company aimed at helping 1,000 Black entrepreneurs build million-dollar businesses. Chris is an alumni of Harvard Business School's OPM 52 and was the first Black keynote speaker in the Harvard Business School's history. Good evening, Mr. Johnson.
Hey, good evening. How you doing?
All right.
Good. Well, thank you for having me. It's a blessing to be here. I really enjoyed Dr. Guthrie's recount of Black Wall Street. One of the things that I'll share, I know a lot of people, every time I have a speaking engagement, I ask how many haven't ever had an idea for a product or invention? And all the hands raise up. And, I asked the second question, how many have seen that same idea that you had be on store shelves? And you're like, man, why didn't I think of that? And about 100% of the hands raised up. I'm going to tell you something that inspired me. It was my grandfather. He said, hey, Chris, what's the richest land in the world? And I said, United States. He said, no. And I said, China. And he said, no. And I said, Grandpa, I give up. What's the richest land in the world? And he said, the graveyard, because that's where so many people died with great ideas in them that they never got out. And that really stuck with me. And I said, you know what? I don't care how small the idea is, I'm going to get it out. And so I'm going to show one idea, and some people are, how many are familiar with these? Ramen noodles. There's 95 billion packs sold per year, but surprisingly, they don't have microwaving instructions on the back of the packs. So anybody that microwave it, you get a bowl, you crush them, you just guess how much water to put in, guess how much time to cook on the in the microwave. And so what I did is I said, man, there has to be a better way. And the long and short of it, I created the rapid ramen cooker. And so a rapid ramen cooker, all you do is take a block of ramen noodles, put it right in here, add water to the water line, pop it in the microwave, take it out with the 2 heat resistant handles, and you got perfect ramen every single time. And so I thought I had a good idea, but I want to share this because I know a lot of people get discouraged. When you have an idea, some people try to bust your balloon and stop you from dreaming. When I had this idea, I remember an email sent to my website anonymously said, this is a dumb idea. It'll never work. You'll never make a dime on this. And it hit me. And that's one of the first lessons I learned on this journey is the difference between faith and fear. Faith and fear are polar opposite, but they have one common denominator. They both want you to believe something that hasn't happened yet. And you got to choose faith or fear, one or the other. And so I said, I'm choosing faith. I'm going to blow this company up. I'm going to make it happen, and I'm going to have success. Fast forward to where we are now. The rapid ramen cooker, I own the patent. It's we're in 50,000 retail stores nationwide, to include Walmart, Target, CVS. It's the #1 bestseller on Amazon. And since this product, and you never know what happens with one idea. With one idea, now we have over 24 products. I've taken over an entire shelf at Walmart in the microwave section. And in the last 8 years, we have generated over $30 million in retail sales. So I share that to tell you what the power is in your idea. What the power is when we're so creative, when we're able to take that creativity, find amazing mentorship to be able to get those products out. So in addition to Rapid Brands, I own a company called Major Views Marketing. I started that with my daughter, 12-year-old daughter, who's amazing at getting influencers and actually making products culture, getting them in the hands of people all across the country. I also own a corporate recruiting company, a technology company called Infinity Connect. And the thing I'm most passionate about that is so that's with the same thing that we're talking today about is, now that I've been really successful of creating multi-million-dollar companies, I had a goal. I said, man, you know what? I'm really good at that. And there are so many of our people that have great ideas, but they just don't know where to start. And I said, my goal is to help a minimum of 1,000 people create $1 million products. 1,000 times 1,000,000 is 1 billion. And that's the type of impact that I want to have. I've already created one. KUTZ will get a good kick out of this. My first one was KUTZ of Rich Barber, and they'll do 1.1 million this year. And it was someone that I mentored and had that success. So I got 999 to go. And then I also just recently secured a partnership with Amazon. And Amazon wants to put their money where their mouth is. Over the next 3 years, they want to bring 2,000 Black businesses on the platform and generate $10 billion in sales. and they tapped me to be able to help out with that. So I think it's huge, and that's the type of impact that I want to have. And I think the most important thing about us as Black entrepreneurs is being an example that it's real. You can have your your product taken off the store shelves. You can actually have people getting the Amazon boxes, opening up and being delighted with your product in there. And so that's when I'm setting my life out to be able to help and consult and help additional businesses have success and build wealth for their families. And so I'm just grateful for the opportunity and the challenge. And that's what I'm about.
All right. Thank you so much. I am definitely going to be looking into one of those ramen cookers. We are now going to move into our question and answer portion. We've had a couple questions come in from the audience. We have a couple questions that have been prepared for everyone. So let's just dive in. One of the questions from the audience was talking about this important educational aspect of Black history. We know that the subject of Black Wall Street, the Red Summer, and other historical instances of Black economic development and later destruction are not often talked about in schools. So the question really is, why is that? And what can we do to ensure that the knowledge of this history moves forward? So Dr. Guthrie, maybe if you can take that one for us.
Oh, thank you, Kara. It's a good question that we always get. For one, people don't want to describe things that were done negatively to them or to their family. Lots of times, for instance, if you survive the thing, it's almost like you want to put it behind you. Many people who went to segregated schools, for instance, say, well, the best thing you can do is just knock down that school because it represented inequality. Well, I think it's different. We have to tell the stories that happen inside of those spaces. We have to talk about the trauma and the triumphs, just as my brother Chris Johnson was talking about. Your idea, sometimes you can turn that negative into a positive. I don't think the school system as a whole, however, is dedicated to that proposition. I've said this as a Black man going through the public school system. It was designed to hammer me down, to get rid of my innovation, to get rid of my energy and, all of that. And I didn't do that. I would push for those stories that I didn't get to hear. I'd push for those things that I didn't get to read. And I would bring them, just as many of us have done, from home, saying, why didn't we study this? Who's Frederick Douglass? How do I only hear about Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver, the Peanut Man? I don't have anything against them. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I wanted to know about Frederick Douglass, and I wanted to know about Crispus Attucks, and I wanted to know about all these other people who had been erased from the history. I memorized all the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, all that, because that's what we were supposed to do. But if I had spent all that energy talking about Malcolm X, Martin King, Fannie Lou Hamer, etc., then I think everybody would have benefited. So the long story short is, it's a history that has been suppressed because we are not in this country in a way that we can talk about racism in a way that is productive. We just haven't figured out how to do it. And whenever we raise it, then it becomes an issue of, well, you're blaming people for things they had nothing to do with. And I think part of our quest in the public sphere, public education, is really just to tell the stories, no matter how hard they are, because they become the foundation for doing something really new and unique. So I'll leave it there. I do teach a Black cinema, African American studies, and ethnic studies, which people have been told you're not supposed to talk about that. So when they get to college and they say, well, why didn't we get told? Is because the school system itself still hasn't figured out how to do culturally appropriate instruction. And so you do have to go to Mr. Cutt. You do have to go to Mr. Johnson. You do have to go to Kim and to Mr. Luster because they have individual stories that will say, this should be told. And until we do that, then we're waiting for a system that really wasn't designed to educate us to do what we need to do. That'd be my long, short answer.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that. I think there's an interesting sense of community education and just an interesting sense of community in general. I think almost every one of the presenters brought up something about the idea of giving back, serving the community, protecting and serving the Black community in particular, finding resources that didn't exist within communities that are historically of color, and finding ways to provide those resources. So the question is, what is important for people to understand about the cultural connectedness of Black entrepreneurship? It's never just about accumulating individual wealth. It's often about that sense of connection, of giving back, building each other up. So this question is kind of directed towards, in particular, Dr. Lester or KUTZ, but any of the panelists, if you can speak to that unique economic outlook and that sense of community that goes into Black business and Black entrepreneurship.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go ahead and take that one. So I liken that question to the early development of our product. And I like to use these examples that I've lived to try to articulate exactly something such as history. So along the way, I was actually building the wrong technology. And so I became very passionate about trying to figure out what I was doing wrong. And so what I did is I used participatory research. So instead of making a guess at what I would actually build, I actually brought in former athletes. I brought in athletes from different walks of life. And I sat there and I put an integrated team around them. And we actually started to extract information and start to translate that back into the technology. So when you look at and you think about history and what we're taught in school, there's no way that I could build something so innovative if I don't do the literature review, if I don't go through the medical journals, if I don't go through previous studies that have been published. There's a saying, you have to stand on the shoulder of giants. So that history was so important. I had to know what worked and what did not work. So I mean, you cannot innovate if you're wasting time doing making mistakes that other people have made. So that was extremely important to me.
Yeah.
Sister Cara, will you allow me to come in for just a moment? I'd like to ask Brother KUTZ a question. As a Black business owner here in Flagstaff, would you sort of share with the community maybe some of the challenges that you encountered, and you know, to perhaps for other entrepreneurs who are of color they have this dream and vision just as you did? Can you kind of walk us through what you encountered and in getting to where you are right now?
Well, absolutely. Like when I was in high school, I couldn't really read, so I was very athletic, so they put me in resource. You know what I mean? I probably could have done better if I'd applied myself, but I didn't because I had took the easy road. So once I graduated and went to college, I couldn't read. I couldn't hardly read. I can read now, but I couldn't hardly read. So it was hard for me to take that next step. You know, I went to barber school and I got through that because it was a shortage in barbers, and the test was the written exam was true and false and ABC questions. You know what I mean? Multiple choice questions. So once I passed that, you know, without really knowing how to read, I went to I went to open up a barber college, and I had to take another written exam, which now it was fill in the blanks, using scientific terms, and you had to spell it right. I took the test took that test 7 times. You know what I mean? It was a real struggle. It took me 2 years to take that test. The state board president was like, "Hey, buddy, don't give up." And then, at that time, my daughter was about to be born, so I was like, I can't give up, you know. So I accomplished that, and once I open up the school, I get kids that can't read, and what I do is sit in a circle and we all read together. And once they see me that I've struggled, and it gives them a little confidence to know that, hey, you know what I'm saying, this guy struggled, look where he's at today, and it just kind of helps them out, to fulfill their dreams, knowing that, you know, uh, it's an obstacle, but if you put your mind to it, anybody can do it. So if somebody say, "Hey, man, I can't read," well, you can't give me any. You come to my school, you can't give me any excuses. I got kids, so you can't tell me I need a babysitter. I, I can't. I couldn't read, so you can't say I can't take this test. So it's things like that that I accomplished in my life that I just want to let other young business owners or young entrepreneurs to know that it's just put your mind to it and work hard for it, and you'll get it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just one more question for you then, Kut. So you have such a strong focus on youth in the work that you do, in educating, mentoring, and as you've said, just giving back and showing them the way forward and showing them that their dreams are achievable. So can you talk a little bit about the importance on passing on this knowledge to youth, to the next generation, and how that helps build up the community as a whole?
Well, it's very important, especially in the world of the art of barbering, because in Flagstaff and in pretty much Arizona, um, the barber is extinct. So for me to put this knowledge out there and provide a future for different barbers, I have a barber just opened up a college in Barber College in Utah. So I got another barber that want to open up one in Prescott. Just to pass the torch like that, and to be able to have these guys look up to me and go out and do that on their own. I mean, that's there's no other feeling besides I done my job. When God take me back home, take me home to heaven, I want to be able to be like, I done what I was supposed to do while I was here. I was a barber. When I get to heaven, I want to be able to cut the apostles' hair and then trim Jesus up if he needed trim.
I love it. I
Yes.
love it. I love it. Since you mentioned that, and I mean, what you're saying is it may be a shock to some of our viewers, but here in the Black community, being in the skin that we're in, spirituality plays a big part.
Amen.
In almost everything, if not everything that we do. So I just wanted to put that out there, that viewers should not be surprised that that is what motivates you to cut hair, and that you're doing that in this life, and that is what you are aiming to do in the next life, and that is Black spirituality, for those who may be watching and were not aware of that. So thank you for adding that nuance into our conversation this evening.
Oh, absolutely. God is the key to success, especially coming from us. You know what I mean? He's the light. He's in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Uh, Sister Bernadine, were we able to get Sister Kim back on?
She's back up right now. There she
All right.
is.
Well, I wanted to go back to something that you mentioned towards the end of your presentation, which was how Black business and Black entrepreneurship brings an important perspective into American business history. So if you can just talk a little bit more about the important perspective of Black entrepreneurship and Black business to American business history. What does it add? Why is it so important to keep that as part of the narrative?
Yeah, we all bring our cultural experiences into our business interests. And I've always believed that every cultural background, every ethnic background adds, it never subtracts, but it definitely enhances and adds to American history. And when we don't have that, just like with Black Wall Street, can you imagine um, if that had not happened? Can you imagine what we as Americans have lost when we lose such a strong and vibrant community? And that's all Americans. So when you have our different voices and our different cultural perspectives, and we do have a shared, Black business owners, we have a shared cultural perspective that's based on our backgrounds. We bring that to the table and we enhance and we offer perspectives and products and ideas that may not have been noticed or seen. And it becomes very important to Americans overall. I can't imagine how many college students, as a college student, I'm very, as a former college student, I was very familiar with ramen noodles. And I can't imagine what the rapid cooker has done for all college students. And can you imagine what would have happened if we did not have that voice, that product, what Americans would have lost? And so with every entrepreneurial idea that is lost, that is destroyed, Americans, we all lose something. And so it's very critical that if you do have an idea, if you do have a passion, you bring that perspective to the table. And the Black voice is very passionate. We have a lot of great ideas. Historically, they've been underestimated and knocked down. And I believe that a lot of Americans, a lot of potential and prospective entrepreneurs have had that experience, and we should see that. We should see our shared our shared passions and bring it all to help the American business landscape.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Mr. Johnson, I want to go back to you on the question of mentorship. It was something that you brought up as well as just being so important to Black business in particular. So can you talk a little bit more about not only what mentorship is or what it means to you, but also why it's so important to Black economic growth and development?
Absolutely. Mentorship is so crucial. I mean, it is absolutely key. You know, so many times we try to navigate a road that's already been walked through 1,000 times. And if we just ask and get connected with the person that's already walked that road, they can tell you where the pitfalls are. They can tell you where the snakes are, how to avoid the snakes. They can tell you where the where to avoid losing money. I mean, it's huge. I'm a big proponent. I tell my kids the same thing of the power of proximity, the power of who you surround yourself around. You know, you hang around four broke people, you'll be the fifth. You hang around someone that's positive and has a ton of energy, you're gonna have the same. And you have mentors that have been where you're trying to go. They've forgotten more than you know. And so I learned that very early on and surrounded myself with great mentors. If someone has a product or a service and they aspire to sell it online or in retail, it's great to have a mentor that's been there. I'll share just a quick story as far as mentorship. One of my good friends, one of my HBS classmates, you guys know him. I'm sure many of you guys use his products. He ran the biggest African-American hair care company in the world, Shea Moisture. Richard Lou Dennis, who's a friend of mine. And he's a peer mentor. I thought that I knew everything as it relates to putting products on the shelf at Walmart until I met Rich, who says he measures his sales by the linear inch. So think about that. But he measures the sales by the linear inch of how much shelf space he has. You think he could teach me something? Absolutely, and he has. So I think it's huge. I think you talked about connectivity as a community. I think that's something that we should have more of. Not only supporting Black businesses, but also successful Black entrepreneurs being able to mentor others that are trying to come up and become successful. And that's the way that we can, create, a really thriving economy is really helping others be able to become successful. So I think it's huge. Mentorship is a huge proponent to success. It can take a 8-year horizon from you start to finish, and that you'll be successful as a millionaire in 8 years. It could take that 0 to 8 years from 0 to 18 months through mentorship. That's how powerful mentorship is.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're getting a lot of comments in the live comment section of people just saying this is an outstanding conversation, thanking all of the panelists for everything that they've contributed. So we've got just 2 more questions coming up. The next one is to go back to Dr. Guthrie. And it's just asking the question of, given the history of Black Wall Street, the connection between Black economic prosperity and events like the Red Summer and Black Wall Street riot in Tulsa, what really is the connection to today? What's the importance of understanding and continuing to work towards the Black economy, Black economic growth, Black business, and all of those things?
Oh, good. Thank you for explaining in detail. That does help center it. So for Black Wall Street, what it shows is that people turned a negative into a positive. They were segregated, they were closed off, they were isolated, but they were not without spirit and without hope. They still had the innovation that Chris is talking about. They still had the inspiration that Mr. Kutt has talked about. And they weren't going to just stay in their little community and their confine. It wasn't their choice to be there. But actually, some started to migrate there when they started the businesses, when they did their own schools, when they did their own barbershops and haircutteries and restaurants. And it was such an exciting place that people from all over would come there. Where'd you get the best haircut? In Greenwood. Where could you get the best food? In Greenwood. Where you can get the best music, arts, culture? In Greenwood. That was an incredible draw. And I still think that happens today in Black communities around the world. I went to South Africa. I went to Paris. I went to Australia. And you know what? They had hair care shops there. Yes, they did. They had Carefree Curl. They had barbershops. Why? Because Black folks are all over the world and they want to have their products. So there was some big entrepreneurs there in the suburbs around Paris, where all the North Africans were, and then South Africa and elsewhere, hair shops that they borrowed from America because you had already figured out how to do your hair. Australia, the same thing. There are Aborigines who were modeling themselves after Black people. And when I visited my friends who are from China and from Japan, you know what? They were curling their hair so they could have an afro. Now, I'm not saying that that's how everything works, but I do think that once you have a belief in yourself and the goodness of yourself, that product will attract other people. The brother was, Dr. Luster was working with biological chemicals. You scare me when you talk about that. But he was able to turn that knowledge into a positive, right? So he's not creating products that are going to be used on the military arena. He's going to look at the football field and try to turn some of that knowledge into helping the people who are subject to concussion, right? Very, very useful use of the technology learned in one field to do in the other. Let me just end by saying, once you've turned the negative into a positive and you start to believe in yourself, this might be a lifetime journey. As Mr. Cut has said, you know, I wasn't cut out to read. I wasn't cut out to be successful, but he made sure that he did. It becomes inspiration to everybody. And the last thing I'll say is the research shows that when you show somebody their cultural appropriateness to have pride in themselves, everybody benefits. Not just the Black people, not just the Chinese people, not just the gay community, everybody does. And so a business model that's built off of that serves everybody. I'll leave it to Mayor Coral to talk about the best way for women to get equity is to become a business owner. Okay, that was what she had said in her message to people during Black History Month when she talked about Ted Johnson. She said, look, that's just not something I say because I have an MBA. It's because as soon as you control your destiny, you control your economics, people will come to you for leadership. It doesn't work the other way around, she said. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Well, before you leave it, Dr. G, you're kind of giving us an entry into defining social entrepreneurship.
Okay.
Would you care to define that for our viewers this evening?
Oh, sure. You know, social entrepreneurship. So the sociality of human beings is pronounced. I mean, we just don't exist by ourselves. We have to have the connection to community. We're always building that. Sometimes they're good communities, sometimes they're not good, just as Mr. Johnson was saying, or as Mr. KUTZ was saying, he had to change the clientele he was hanging out with because he became a business owner. He had to do certain things. So we're all social beings. But the idea of being an entrepreneur, right, is a fancy word for saying someone who's a starter, a self-starter. All right. And so if you combine that, I like being part of a community, which I enjoy when I go to Mr. KUTZ barber shop, and I combine that with self-starting, then I have something very powerful that could be done. And, you know, I'd like to talk about the different formulas for doing that. The Nguzo Zaba by Ron Karenga talks about that. Ujamaa is a collective collective economics, cooperative economics. There's a whole value system that he put in place that a lot of African countries did because they couldn't depend on gifts or loans from the West. So they had to develop Ujamaa, cooperative work and economics, Ujima, collective work and responsibility, and there are several others. So if you had a formula, you could use that, Ashe. But you could simply say, as you're mentioning, the sociality of human beings, trying to give a common good, and being rewarded for being a self-starter instead of waiting for somebody to say, there's a job for you down at Walmart. You know, it's okay. But once you get to Walmart, you're like, I'm not satisfied with that. I want to do my own version of Walmart. And that's the social part coming into the entrepreneurship together. I think our business people know more about this than I'm looking at from the outside of someone who's observed it, but I'm glad you asked the question.
Well, I kept Brother Cut up because this yet is another doorway to talk about what is going on here in Flagstaff, and namely that is the Market of Dreams in Sunnyside. Brother Cut, would you care to share with the community? And we have some people here. I have to give a shout out from the East Coast here this evening, so a long way from Arizona. But would you care to enlighten us on the Market of Dreams in Sunnyside?
Oh, the Market of Dreams is an awesome not program, but it's an awesome venue over here right across the street from the barbershop. And it has different different units in there where you can go in and you can be a cook or you have your own business idea, and they'll let you go in and use that venue to be your own business owner. You know what I mean? And it's really a big thing for the community to have something like that will work with you and help you to become a great business owner in this community, for sure.
And I wanted you to speak on that because I have to give you your props and to say thank you publicly for your support of the Market of Dreams in Sunnyside. And I think all of our entrepreneurs would agree that a large part of business success is about giving back to the community. And a place like the Market of Dreams certainly is giving back to Flagstaff, is helping families and individuals to thrive, to make their visions come true. I cannot talk about Sunnyside without also giving a shout out to our Sunnyside Neighborhood Association. And they are the ones that actually operate or oversee the operations of the market. So with that, I would like to ask each of you to share with the community why Black business matters. And we want to hear something from each of you on why do you think Black business matters?
Well, personally, I think Black businesses matter to show Americans, show the world that we can be entrepreneurs, and show the little kids of the community that is Black, that is getting shamed on or whatever, that they can be a staple in the community. Um, Role models. I think sharing our culture through our business is things that I believe that's why Black business is as important to me. You know.
I'll jump in here. As far as the reason why Black businesses are important, a big part of it is wealth. Um, Wealth is a powerful tool to be able to bless others, and it puts you in rooms that's where you can actually make a difference as well. I think also it's aspirational. I know when I had my products on the shelf, and it does something when I married my high school sweetheart. We've been together since I was 14 years old. We have 4 kids. And no matter where we travel, we go into a store and we see one of our products, we buy it, and my kids, and it rings, and then they give us a receipt. And it's something powerful when your own kid can take that receipt. What do you think they think is powerful in their mind, right? Their minds just goes like, it's possible. It's huge, right? And so I think one evidence of that is in my own household. My 16-year-old son has a joke book on Amazon, and he wrote the joke book. It's Joe's Joking Jokes. And I just had to write him his check, the kid, 16 years old, for $4,400, right? And so that's a lot for a 16-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And you see that his reviews on Amazon. It's the same thing with my daughter. Like, there is no limits on what they can do. There's no limits, and they see absolutely no limits. I think all of our kids deserve to have that type of mindset on what's possible, regardless of what your color. And so I think that's the importance of Black business. and the wealth generations that where you can impact generations you don't even know yet. And so that's why I feel like it is so important.
You know, Dr. Johnson, technology, I mean, that's where we are right now. And so in relation to technology, and where we should be guiding our youth right now, I really do want to ask you that question, why Black business matters.
Yeah, so along this journey, one thing that I've learned to do is really I've learned to listen. So a lot of times, and the way this world is going, technology is ubiquitous. It's built into our life, literally. So without this ability and being taught to listen, you'll miss key factors. I'll tell you a little bit about one of the first technologies I set out to build. We were building a wrist-worn device for stroke survivors, and we were doing the research in the lab, but I decided to go down to the rehab center and sit with the physical therapist. And during that time, I got to listen and watch what the physical therapists were doing with their patients. And to my surprise, they were reaching out and touching the stroke survivor. And so that was groundbreaking for me. I went back to the lab. I said, hey, guys, what they were doing is touching someone, and being in the lab for so long that you're not used to physical contact. And so what we did is we implemented small little vibration motors that are found in your cell phone to emulate that physical therapy. So we built an algorithm that would identify the movement and activate just like we saw. So it's just really about you have to be able to listen and look and learn from the things that are around you. Another thing that I bring to the classroom when I teach my students at the community college, they're not used to seeing an entrepreneur that looks like them. And so when I pull out the technology and we go from start to finish, from starting the ideation phase all the way to getting the patent and having the resistance to fight all of the no's and to wait the 7 years to get the patent. It almost took 7 years to get our first patent. And for them to see someone that looks like them, tell them it's possible, that's important. So, and you definitely need that in technology. So.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Sister Kara, did we have some other questions for our panelists?
Well, it was brought up, one of the panelists who unfortunately couldn't make it tonight was Mr. Clovis Campbell, who is the publisher of the Arizona Informant. And so I think just going back to that conversation of the importance of Black business and promoting Black business, it was just brought up about the importance of the Black press and why that is so important. Maybe Dr. Guthrie, if you could speak a little bit about that as well.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to give a 30-second shout out to Clovis Campbell, who's like a second or third generation. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. So if I may, the second or third generation in his family, starting a business that was exactly as you have said, it served the purpose that was not being fulfilled by other businesses. And it became, penny by penny, dime by dime, dollar by dollar, until it could sustain a whole community, really, by putting out a perspective and informant. You had newspaper boys and girls, you had people who were in the press room, you had writers, you had a whole array of people who had different skills, all inside of the Black newspaper in its heyday, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And even today, even though the electronic communication has taken over, if they're smart, right, they're able to innovate and use the digital technologies to sustain what was already there. But you can't just use the old business models in terms of advertising and selling of ads. That's just not going to work. So what I wanted to say was Clovis Campbell, when he was the head of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, he set up a variety of partnerships with corporations and businesses, big and small, all across the country and around the globe. And so that still happens for the little Arizona informant to be part of a network and to see itself as part of a global combine instead of I'm just serving Phoenix. So I just want to put that out there. He's one of the Black publishers that I interviewed for the idea, is there a digital future for the Black press, right? Is there a future for journalism? Everybody says no, hell no. But Clovis Campbell and others are saying, well, we have to solve that. We have to figure out how to make journalism of a new kind if we follow the ideas that we're doing a service to the community. It's not the New York Times that's going to tell your story, Mr. Cut. It's not the Arizona Daily Sun, although that's nice to have. It's going to be someone who knows what you're about. So I just want to say that one of the first and more successful business enterprises were sharing the written word and turning it to something that could keep people, make a couple dollars here and there as a teenager selling papers or whatever. That could still be done.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Absolutely. And just the history, I think, of that family is also important to note, with his father being the first Black senator or representative in the state of Arizona. Mr. Clovis Jr. as well was part of the House of Representatives for the state of Arizona. So just seeing how that legacy continues for the state and in that development of Black culture and Black business enterprise within the state of Arizona and spreads out. I think Flagstaff has a very unique place in that history as well, with our Mayor Coral Evans being the first Black female mayor. And just the importance of the work that she has done, and the different leaders that we have within the Flagstaff community that we're seeing here on this panel, who are bringing this education and this information and this history to the present, and keeping this story going and letting people see the importance of this going forward as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so we have made it to the end of our broadcast for this evening. I bless each and every one of you this evening for making the time to bless us, to bless all of the viewers that are here with your expertise, to share your vision, to inspire those entrepreneurs who are up and coming, be it in Flagstaff and Arizona, all around this nation, all around the world. We thank you. We do this because we began this by talking about having a seat at the table. And so as I listened to each of you this evening, and when I remember historically where we have been as people of African descent in this world, the first entrepreneur that I learned of was actually written in the Christian scriptures called the Bible. There was a woman from a certain region of Africa, or Kibulan, who was a seller of purple. And so she was a merchant. And she's actually one of the first entrepreneurs that's mentioned in the Bible, who happens to be a woman of color. So all of that to say that we have been around since the beginning of time. We have been entrepreneurs, we have been scholars, we've been inventors, we have been and are very financially successful. And so that is what this platform is all about, to enlighten and to inform. We thank our viewers this evening for joining us. We will be back in 2 more weeks with another great topic. But before we end, we want to give a special shout out to our mayor, Sister Mayor Coral Evans. And we'd like to mention the fact, and we have to mention the fact, that she is the executive director of the Sunnyside Market of Dreams. And so she is taking her vision of financial freedom for all people to the community so that others can lift themselves up and become entrepreneurs for whatever reason. If it's a dream, if it's to have financial independence, this is the brainchild of our mayor. So we give a shout out to her this evening. Thank you, Flagstaff. Thank you, all viewers. Wherever you are, please continue to come in and join us. This is all about we as people of color taking our seats at the table. Thank you so much and have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.